A couple of sources told me that in the transitional period after the election and before he was sworn in as governor, that one of the richest people in the state came to see you on the issue of the income tax and such, and pointed out that he paid as much income tax as by himself as a Connecticut city does, and you have to think about that when you decide on tax policy. These people can kind of take their taxes elsewhere. So did this meeting happen? And and what does this say?
I can tell you that the 100 richest taxpayers in the state last year, the year before, paid about 10% of the income tax, and more than the entire corporate income tax of 45,000 companies were paid by a pretty tiny group of people. And I do want them to stay in Connecticut and invest in Connecticut and help us grow in Connecticut. And there have been a couple of conversations to that effect.
So, so that takes kind of the big debate that may take place. The progressive wing in the party in the legislature seems to want to see that as the easiest solution, rather than you kind of delayed some of the tax cuts that they have previously put through or proposed delaying them and such, and you want some concessions from labor. They see the obvious trade-off, rather than doing those things, is to raise that highest level on people who can, they say, easily afford it, and without much.
So let me pull the lens back just for 1 second. What I tried to do in my budget address was strike a balance. I got to remind folks that we really are in a severe budget crisis, and I really don't think that most people appreciate that. They think it's like global warming or the debt clock in Washington, D.C., and something off in the distance. So I wanted to get people to focus on this is a near-term crisis, but it's solvable. And that it's solvable in the near term, but that we have to solve it because fiscal stability is a precondition to getting the state growing again. I hear that wherever I go. You heard that from the fiscal commission that convened last year, and I was trying to strike a balance there in terms of optimism and how we get the state going again and how we get it growing, and that's the long-term solution, and near-term some real fixes, not phony fixes. And I tried to strike a slightly different tone than what they're used to in the past, and said, look, it's a first draft. It's my best effort. I think it's real. I don't think it's based on gimmicks. I think it's fair. We can debate about that. I think I've asked all folks to do a little bit to get this state back in the balance. And to your point, Paul, I think immediately everybody ran right to their usual talking points. And, there were the group that said, tax millionaires more, which would be the 4th time in 10 years, the 5th time in 12 years. There was the group that said, you're not cutting spending enough. Hammer the spending harder. So everybody went right into their foxholes pretty quickly. And the only thing I had asked was, give me a better idea. I've tried to tell the progressives that everybody's going to do a little more. Wealthier communities, you probably saw, we've been asking them to contribute a little more, especially when it comes to the teacher's pension. The corporate community, I've asked them to do a little bit more. They're not getting the tax cut, the elimination of the surcharge that we've been counting upon. I've certainly been out loud and clear in terms of what we got to do to fund, our transportation needs in this state, be it truck only or cars and trucks, which we can talk about. So I tried to put forward a budget that I thought was fundamentally fair and, more importantly, actually gets the job done.
Mm-hmm. Editorially, we agreed on kind of broad plan for structural change, but but the debate over on the tax side seems like it may come down to the to tax the billionaires as opposed to some of the ideas you've come up with, is delay some of the tax breaks that are due, spread out the sales tax to cover more services. So I was wondering where you're going to stand on that. Is that a line in the sand for you, that you just think it's a bad idea for the state to go there? Would you entertain it as an alternative? So trying to understand, where your position will be as this debate takes place as to where some revenue is going to be necessary.
Well, I put forward my preferred plan. I said I'm not interested in raising the income tax. We've done it 5 times in the recent past. There's a law of diminishing returns. We're getting less money out of it. I've got other ways that wealthier communities are going to contribute more. I did say that as part of our plan, we've got savings on health care, re-amortizing the pension, which would at least get rid of the fiscal cliff and save us some near-term money. And I did talk about, rather than raising the rate on the sales tax, expanding the base. I made the case on a policy argument that the sales tax used to be the workhorse of the Connecticut revenue streams. It was applied to, we had this conversation, I think, once,
Yeah.
but all I can do is repeat myself. But, it used to apply to 75% of our economy. Today, the sales tax applies to much less than 50% of our economy. The sales tax applies to the slowest growing part of the economy, the Sears Roebuck economy, the lawnmowers that are sold over the counter, but it doesn't apply to lawn mowing services. Fastest growing pieces of our economy, the service economy and the digital economy. So I said, rather than have a higher rate on a smaller and smaller piece of the economy, I would have a lower rate on a broader piece of the economy. But I think the one thing that the Republican leadership, the Democratic leadership, and the New London Day all agree on is it probably is not going to happen. It's just a lot more complicated to tax lawnmower services and yoga and barbershops, and it's a lot easier just to ratchet up the sales tax a little bit. And there's room to do that. So, look, the door is open. I'm giving you my best idea on how I think we can do it. I think our way of doing it, to hold the rate, expand the base, is more in keeping with the 21st century economy. Am I willing to compromise on that? Yeah, I got to get a budget done.
Wanted to ask you kind of a big issue is the casinos and where we go from here. The Windsor Locks jointly developed casino between the tribes was approved by the legislature, got hung up because we didn't get the federal approval was necessary. There's legislation now saying go ahead with it, even without the Department of Interior approval. But also seeming having a new life is the idea of an open competition, potentially entertain a casino in the Bridgeport area. So could you kind of help us understand where you stand on this debate, or where we may go forward with?
Yeah, get this debate out of the muck. We've been sort of stuck for years now, and the tribes suing MGM, MGM suing the tribes, Connecticut standing back. Oh my gosh, what happens to the compact? So what I can tell you, Paul, is we've taken a lead on this. We've sat down with both the tribes as well as MGM and trying to reach an agreement that doesn't involve lawyers. And I got a 50% chance of getting that done, and I'll have more to tell you in the next few weeks.
Can I follow up on that? Yeah. The mayor reported, I don't know if it was yesterday or today, but that at the Governors Association meeting in Washington, you declined to say whether or not you supported East Windsor casino plan. So I don't know if that's accurate, but and that you preferred the tribes to work out a deal with MGM, which sounds like what you're talking about. In your best case scenario, what would that be? What would the deal between the tribes and MGM be?
Without getting in too much detail, it's a deal that would maintain our commitment to the tribes and the compact in a way that satisfies both parties, get the lawyers to stand down, and we have something going on in Bridgeport as well. Let me just leave it at that.
I mean, it sounds like it would mean some kind of MGM presence in the state to get them on board and happy.
I'll let what I said stand.
Okay.
You know, give me just a little bit of time, but I just want you to know that, you know, like I said, it's 50-50. You know, these guys, there's no love lost there. I'm inheriting a lot of deep-seated enmities in this state, and that's one of them. And but that's an advantage I got. I'm the new kid on the block, and every time people tell me about 10 years of bad history, I say that's great. This is the first day. Let's start again, and we got a shot. We got a shot at getting it done.
Our concern has been that we wonder if Bridgeport is just a ruse by MGM, that they really have no intent of ever putting a shovel in the ground, that what they want to do is delay things as long as possible. Springfield is underperforming. It's certainly not in their interest to see East Windsor open up because they're already not doing as well as they hoped. So anything they can do, you know, to delay Connecticut and have them keep talking for years about Bridgeport potentially, is to their advantage. So that's our concern, and obviously our...
That's a fair concern. I mean, I can address it by saying as part of an open process, you're going to have to put up a $500 million letter of credit to tell us you're serious. So I can address that concern, but I don't think we're going to have to get there.
We didn't see sports betting, I don't think, unless we missed it in the budget, any revenue, and we know it's not perhaps the big revenue driver that some people maybe anticipate it would be, but...
I just didn't put anything that we hadn't agreed to yet in the 2-year budget. And I alluded to the fact that, look, in years 3 and 4, I think you're going to see revenues in there. I think maybe I'm conservative. Maybe we can get something going, you know, in the second year of the biennium, something like that, if it works. But that cat's out of the bag. The train has left the station. You know, we're going to have sports betting in this state, and I just got to work out the other pieces of the puzzle to see who does it and how we do it.
Mm-hmm. Are there active discussions now? We know the Malloy administration apparently took it to a certain point, but knowing a new administration was coming in, it wasn't, for whatever reason, those discussions did not...
Yeah, it's part of our broader discussion that I was alluding to. You know, we got to work out first the issue between the tribes and MGM, and then sports betting and internet and all that is going to come after that, but right after that. I just don't see any reason. Look, is it the future of the state? No. Do I do this type of gambling? Not of interest to me at all. I got enough risk in my life. I don't need that type of stuff. And but is it happening all around us? Is Gina doing it? Absolutely. So we're going to be part of that. And it's going to mean some revenues to the state, and it's going to mean some activity in some of the entertainment centers we got, starting with the casinos.
All right. So Plan A is see if you can get some kind of grand compromise that addresses these things. Do you worry about Plan B if that 50% doesn't play out?
I think that's a pretty good summary. You got a better idea of all the years.
We'll talk about it. I get the like you. I get to talk with a board of people before we put out.
Could you? You've gotten a lot of heat on car tools. Could you talk about your evolution from just trucks to cars and trucks and the numbers? And
you know, 9 months ago, I looked at the fact that they couldn't even bring tolling up to a vote in the legislature. It was considered that unpopular or controversial or repugnant. So, you know, during the campaign, I said, let's walk before we run. Let's see what we can get started with. Let's get started with tolling on just the tractor-trailer trucks. I think over the next 6 months, the Rhode Island example will be resolved, and we'll know whether that legal case is resolved one way or the other. And assuming that you can broadly toll just tractor-trailer trucks, and Rhode Island feels like that may be the decision, then we know how to go ahead. And then we'll see where that leads from there. That was sort of my, position. All of a sudden, I'm in mid-February, and I've got to do a budget. And I'm finding out from Rhode Island that they may not have resolution on the legal case, and that the resolution on the legal case may be much narrower than we thought, meaning you can toll trucks just on bridges as they're under repair, something like that. So all of a sudden it goes from a $250 million opportunity down to a $10 million opportunity. So then I said, all right, well then probably since upgrading our transportation system is key to economic growth in this state, in case we don't get resolution on Rhode Island soon, or if we don't get resolution in a way that allows us to really start fixing our roads and bridges and speeding up our rail, I'm also going to present you with a proposal to do cars and trucks. And that's just what we did. And maybe in the next 60, 90 days, something will be resolved and the legislature will know that there's an opportunity to get to $250 million out of tractor trailers only. And maybe that's a way they want to go. Maybe that's politically a little more palatable for them. My hunch is we're not going to get clean resolution on that. And I'm not inclined to wait however long it takes before there's something that's legally clear. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to get started on putting in place a tolling system that allows us to fix this bridge over here and allows us to make the long-term capital commitments we need to get the state moving again. And I go to business leaders far and wide. That's one of the things I do. And I've talked to folks who are thinking about the state, and I got to say, gridlock is in the top two things they always ask me about, that and probably pension overhang. And I got to be able to tell them something, not I'm waiting to see what Rhode Island says, the legislature needs more detail. I think I want to put that train on track. And, it's going to take a year to get all the specifics. Some people have said, give me more detail. Tell me where each and every gantry is going to go. Tell me what the pricing is going to be. And you've got 90% of that information now. And if you want the rest of the detail, we'll have to do a more thorough tolling study. But I think the legislature said, forget it. I don't want to pay for a tolling study now. We haven't even made up our mind on the go, no-go decision. That made some sense to me, what they said. So I said, look, we're going to hold off on doing the final engineering and design on this. I think we're going to give you enough information that you can give me direction. Do you want to go this way? Cars and trucks, $800 million a year, a couple of years, real discounts for Connecticut, real discounts for frequent flyers. Make sure that the out-of-staters pay for over 40% of the cost. If it's $1 billion a deal, that's $400 million a year we're getting from out-of-staters. So it kind of matters to me. And so if I evolved, that was sort of what prompted it. And I think we ought to get resolution on this. At least I'd like the legislature to give me resolution on this as part of this budget.
Mm-hmm. Any worry that you won't get federal approval for that? Because it's kind of different than what states normally do with tolls.
I think that the cars and trucks, we're going to get federal approval on it. We're already on sort of a fast track for that right now. I was trying to meet with Elaine Chow from Transportation when I was in Washington over the weekend. I didn't get there, but that's easier. Obviously, the tractor trailer thing is going to be a little more complicated, and I do worry that it would delay things.
So the $10 million that Governor Malloy announced he was borrowing to prepare a study, and he said it would be ready for the next governor, and so that was not done. And
no, that's on hold in my books.
Okay.
Look, if the senior legislators say do it, I need more detail. I want to know if there's going to be a gantry at exit 52 and what that gantry is going to look like. Then I'll do it. If they say don't spend the money now until we make the bigger decision, which I think makes more sense, we're going to hold off. And as a small aside, I don't like the bond for consulting studies. That's called an operating expense in my world. If we're going to do it, let's do it right.
Yeah, then you have to get the legislature to approve it. Which
all right, good point. Hey, maybe bonding works. Okay.
It's a conclusion Governor Malloy reached, I guess, at that point.
What do you see in the long term for Fairfield County in the 95 choke and the gridlock? And it doesn't seem to be an easy solution. And you know Fairfield County so well, but it's hard to imagine making the road bigger.
Oh, I think we can make a big difference. A small difference in 4 years and a big difference in 10 years. It was really important to me to get Joe Giletti as our transportation czar. And, because we get the sort of the the back of the hand from New York, Metro North. We don't even have a vote on that. And if I could accelerate that rail service, that 30-30-30, it's going to take time, but let's start with 40-40-40. That makes a transformative difference, and I cannot do that without New York. So Joe is the former president of Metro North, gives us the best opportunity, and he's talking to them right now. And we can get some...
So train relief from the highway, in other words.
Well, yeah, we can do it. You repair some of those bridges so the train doesn't have to slow up to 10 miles an hour going over it. All of a sudden, you're making a 5-minute difference. And, 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there, pretty soon Bridgeport is part of the commuting circle again. Right now, it's a little bit out of that circle if you're talking about Midtown Manhattan as the epicenter. Amazon says, I want an alternative to New York City because they didn't treat me so well. If I can tell them, look, Stanford's going to be 40 minutes away again, this is right within your zone of likelihood, that helps a lot. The roads is obviously a little bigger, but Giletti and his predecessor did say that there are probably 2 or 3 choke points where you don't have to add another lane, but just accelerate the exits a little bit, and you could speed up the road traffic by, 10 minutes, enough to make a difference. If I can use congestion pricing, which is what the feds do allow, and give people an incentive to, take their big tractor trailers during the off-peak hours, that makes a difference. I mean, I'm a sociology major, so the thing that took me a little bit of time to realize is if I get 5% off the cars off the road, that doesn't speed things up by 5%. It can speed things up by a lot more than that because you get rid of the worst of the choke points. So there's a lot we can do.
Some of those folks, if they have to pay a toll, they might decide they can sit at home with their laptop and do the same thing they would have done at the office, perhaps.
Yeah, or take the train.
Yeah.
Or take the train. That's why we need 5G. Exactly. Get 5% more to work out of their house.
You got a lot of pushback on your proposal that towns provide some share of the teacher pensions, as your predecessor did, and you packaged it differently. You think you can push through that through the legislature? Because the big focus of your campaign and your agenda is structural change, but that's the toughest change. How do you see that fight?
I think most important thing we did was, pull us back from the precipice on the teacher's pension bond. I mean, you understood that, but most of the legislature didn't really pay attention to the fact that if the markets don't keep producing at 8% a year, which they really don't, I mean, they don't in the very good times, then our pension annual contributions could have gone through the roof and really put us on the edge. That was serious. So that was the first thing we did, working with Treasurer Wooden, working with the bondholders who, they had a lot of leverage, let's put it that way. It was a really dumb bond. But that said, I think we'll be able to stretch that out over a period of time. And I want to fix those costs so that over time our fixed costs are a smaller piece of the budget. Right now, as you pointed out and I pointed out, it's about 1/3 of the budget. It's incredible. 2 or 3 times more than any of our neighbors. So as part of the way to reduce the state's cost and give the towns and cities a little skin in the game, look, everything that happened in the past, that's our fault. Shame on us. We got this enormous unfunded liability. But going forward, the towns can contribute a little bit to their own pension costs. And if you're a distressed community, it's just 5%. I can't, Malloy's plan, he was going to ask New Haven, Hartford, and New London. It just, it would have bankrupted him. It was just absolutely, undoable. And I've asked, towns like my hometown of Greenwich, God bless you, you pay your teachers 30% more. Your pension obligations per teacher are 30% more. You actually have a lot more teachers per student as well, so it's even more than that. So why don't you contribute to the excess there? We'll pay up to the average. We'll pay up to what, let's say New Britain's the average, and you pay over and above that. So that's one way. I do have some of the communities, generally the wealthier ones, but it's not a straight line, contributing a little bit more there. So I think it's fair. I think it makes sense. I think it saves the state some dough, and you got a better idea. I'm all yours.
Well, yeah. I guess it's those short-term solutions, that kind of phony temporary fix that gets that's usually the fallback if a governor can't get a legislature.
But that's not a
to make
phony
the hard
short-term
choices.
fix.
No,
I mean,
no, I'm saying that.
is,
No, I say that is. But he's saying, what's the alternative? And from
Oh,
my
yeah, oh,
experience,
yeah.
the alternative is usually smoke
I'll do
and
rolling.
mirrors.
We won't pay anything for 5 years, then I'll have a balloon payment in 2027. Ha ha. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Get us through a few.
Yeah.
Get us through a few elections. And
Yeah.
such. And that's always
Okay.
and that's the challenge. Governor certainly has to get the legislature not to take the easy.
And we're doing it over 3
easier
years.
path.
You know, I'm not hammering anybody. I mean, you got time to plan for it and you kind of know what we're thinking.
And your regional school initiative, what's kind of what kind of feedback have you got on that? And encourage, saying your proposal that there would be some penalties, and correct me if I'm wrong, some penalties and loss of state funding if you don't look for regional initiatives, if you're a smaller school system, to try to be more efficient, cut down on backroom costs and such.
What I said in my speech and in our budget, by far the biggest thing that I want to do to encourage regional and back office sharing, I said it 100 times during the campaign. I'm not asking any town to give up their school districts. I respect their feisty independence. But if two towns, each with a very relatively small school, want to rebuild their own small school, I'll be a little less likely to provide state bonding support for that. If they want to combine that school and have a shared superintendent and some shared services, and I see some long-term savings, I'd be much more likely to bond that. So some of the wealthier communities, you're not getting any funding. There's no strings attached to it. They can do whatever they want. So I've tried to use carrot, not stick. I'm not penalizing anybody, but I am incenting people to do it. Your school district is your school district. There's been a lot of confusion about that, Paul, and I know there's a lot of bills coming out of the legislature that folks are stirring up, but I'm very clear on what I want to do there. Incent people through my bonding authority to share more services and even have some larger schools.
How about a small school district that doesn't need to bond? Maybe they've already built a new school, but they've got, not a lot of students, but they have a superintendent, a finance director. Are you going to do anything to encourage them to regionalize and not have those back office positions, or is it?
Well, first of all, I can't figure out why I have to encourage them to do that. You would think that they look at the numbers. They would say, I got a superintendent for 1,000 schools. The superintendent can also do 10,000 students, and maybe we can share some things. And I'd be a hero of our first selectman because I reduced taxes by $1 million. But anyway, that doesn't seem to be happening.
No.
So, I think I would look at the aid that we provide there. Most of it's set under the ECS formula, but where I have some discretion, and try and give people an incentive to share some of those things. But that's not where I'm coming from. I'm really coming from using my bonding authority, because that's something I have a little more control over.
There's been a couple of legislative leaders that have put out proposals more in that vein to try to force some consolidations and such. I don't think you've taken a position on Looney's bill. Senator Austin, one of our local senators, had these bills that kind of sort of would force, I think, communities of a certain size to look for regional initiatives. Have you kind of take a position on that?
Yeah, I like my plan a lot better.
Is that right? Fair enough.
It was encouraging, your involvement with the agreement to share the revenue from the Port Authority with the city. But I wondered, not to be ungrateful, why not more? Can you talk a little about how you arrived at the 10%, and is that something that might change on into the future if the port grows more and the city has more responsibilities as a result of that?
I was just trying to make a deal. I mean, I didn't want to see the port and wind, and we're going to up our allocation to wind. They're discussing that right now, up to potentially 15% of our overall energy use here in the state over a period of time. You know, pretty windy yesterday. That's a real source of that's a real source of power, and I just didn't want you know, Port Authority and the city and that dispute to derail what's a much bigger picture. I didn't get myself involved in is it 10% or 20%. I just said, make this happen. Put some people in that room and don't let them out until we make a deal. And we made a deal, and I understand where Pastro's coming from. I'm not getting any tax on this, and I also understand the port was looking to maximize their return on it. So I think it works.
On offshore wind, Governor, prices have gone down, costs have gone down in Europe. In Massachusetts, the Vineyard Wind project came in at a much cheaper rate for ratepayers than what people were expecting. But we still get concerns from folks who say that offshore wind is too expensive. It's going to end up costing ratepayers more money. But both the legislature and you have called for bringing in bigger procurements of offshore wind. What do you say to folks who say this is going to end up ramping up our energy bills when we've already got high bills?
We said we want to ramp it up to 15%. You know, like most of our neighboring states, it's obviously carbon-free. It obviously complements solar, so that when the wind blows in the winter and the solar is not quite as effective. So there's a lot of long-term reasons to do it. Millstone, 20-year life, something like that. We got to start thinking about the transition. But it is all subject to price. To get to the heart of your question, I mean, it's not like it's 15% at 20 cents per kilowatt hour. So we're not going there. We have total discretion under PURA, which is our rate-making group, to say no unless the price is competitive.
Doubling back on the budget, you said the size went to some of their predictable corners. The Republicans saying, where are the spending cuts? The Republican you ran against for governor, Mr. Stefanowski, when we'd ask him how are you going to get rid of the income tax, so I'm going to talk to my department head and say find 5% cuts in the budget. It'll be their job to find. They can look at the budget. There must be ways to make savings in that budget. Did the Lamont administration go through anything like that? Going to your people that are going to run your departments and saying, and
no, absolutely. But first of all, remember these commissioners have been there for 3 weeks, so let's start with a little reality at least. Secondly, we did ask them to give us some scenarios, and we got some real savings ideas. The big savings, Paul, are going to be as we move to a much more online digital government. And I alluded to that in the speech, just that we can cut 80% of the cost out if we're doing as much, if all the transactions that now require a line and paperwork are done electronically. And, some states are ahead of us there. Country of Estonia, they're all online. Louisiana, they do their DMV is online. Louisiana, come on, can't we compete? I mean, so it's
get
not
a headline in Louisiana.
Yeah, we love Louisiana, hey, Governor. But so this is not pie in the sky stuff. Those are where the real savings are. I mean, God bless Malloy, and he through attrition we got 13% fewer state employees, and I asked all the upper middle management guys, all those legislative liaisons and personnel and legal, to submit their resignations so that we can think about how we centralize some of that function. We don't need independent fiefdoms at every single commission. Real money there? Not really, but just a way to show that we're taking this seriously. I hired the consultant, Somebody told me any idiot can, tear $1 billion out of the budget. So we've got this group. They're going to get back to us within, I think it's 6 months, with the best cost-saving ideas they see from other states around the country, and see what we can replicate, and maybe bring some of those ideas in for the second biennium if they come in with some reasonable thoughts.
Did you bond for their fee?
We're paid for that. Got me.
So this big change digitally, that was your business, was in communications, and so is this, do you see like a transformative change during your term in office?
I do. I mean, if I had, so what do you want to do in 4 years? I'd want to say, I gave the citizens of Connecticut a vision for what their transportation system is going to look like, and that things are going to get better, and this is going to be a place where you want to start a business or grow your business. When it came to our government, it didn't happen overnight, but you saw in place a way that we radically reframe how we deliver our services at a lot less cost with a different set of people and probably fewer people. Mm-hmm. I said, during the speech that, we could be retiring 10, 15,000 folks out of 45,000 over the next, 5 years or so. And that's a threat and an opportunity. And I got a guy, Josh Jamal, who's amazing, running Department of Administrative Services. I mean, usually that's more of a political appointment. This guy's 12 years at IBM. He's bringing in new commissioners who have spent time leaning up services. In his case, it's in the digital world. So I think I got the team in place to do it. I've just got to convince people that say, you're not cutting enough now, that we've got the building blocks to make substantive change.
I know you're moving behind. On that question of size of government, I guess if you indulge me just on this last one, I think a lot of the impression, people see the budget problem every year. You try to make the case it's really being driven largely by these fixed costs, and you have to get the fixed costs under control. But what's your impression of the size of government in Connecticut? I mean, everyone talks about cutting waste and such. Having gone through a budget preparation process, what's your sense of, do we have a bloated government? Is it not so? Is that sort of an impression people falsely have? Can you give some kind of
all I know right now, Paul, is every fifth desk is empty because some guy at OPM said cut another 3%, cut another 3%. They did it through attrition, and it was a thoughtless process. And so I'm not doing that. And most of what we do is very service related. I mean, DCF and taking care of those kids who otherwise don't have a parent. So I can't digitize that. When it comes to purchasing, when it comes to delivery of all the paperwork and digitizing that, I think you're going to radically transfer. You're not going to recognize what government looks like in the next 10 years, and we're going to be a forerunner there. It'll be smaller, more electronic, and on your screen. And maybe not everybody's going to have to drive to Hartford. They'll be able to do more of that remotely as well.